Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going deep into something I think a lot of parents out there will really connect with. How much do we actually influence our teenagers when it comes to reading?
It's a great question,
Mm,
and it's one that I get asked a lot.
right. It feels like a bit of a black box sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're off in their own world with their friends and all the things that teenagers are into. And we shared a research paper with you. It's called The Role of Parents in Adolescents Reading Motivation and Activity.
By Susan Litzklaude.
Exactly. And we wanted to really unpack this with you and pull out the most important takeaways for you.
Yes. So this paper was published in 2009 in Educational Psychology Review. And what's really cool about it is it looks specifically at research from 4th through 12th grade. So, we get a lot of emphasis on early childhood literacy. But what happens as kids get older?
Right. What happens when they get to be teenagers? Do we still have any impact?
And Cloude's paper kind of does this amazing job of bringing together all this different research, both quantitative and qualitative.
Mm,
And it really connects it to these core theories of reading motivation.
that's right. And that's what's so important for you listening right now. I mean, we often hear that once kids hit their teens, peers take over.
Right.
Parents are kind of left on the sidelines. So what we want to do in this deep dive is really see what the research says. Can parents still make a difference in their teenagers' reading lives? And if so, how? So let's jump in.
One of the first things that the paper points out is that there's this clear trend. As kids get older, they tend to have less positive feelings towards reading. They just don't enjoy it as much, and they read less often than younger children.
That's right. It's not just anecdotal. It's pretty consistently shown in the research.
Right. And it almost seems counterintuitive because you'd think as they become better readers, more capable readers, they would enjoy it more.
Right. But the paper really digs into what we actually mean when we talk about reading motivation. And it turns out that it's a lot more complicated than just, do they like to read or do they not like to read?
Absolutely. So the paper looks at several kind of well-established theories of motivation. And what we find is that reading motivation is really multidimensional. There are all these different layers to it. So for example, you know how confident do teenagers feel about their reading abilities?
Right.
Do they feel confident as readers?
Do they think they're good at it?
Exactly. Are they reading because they genuinely enjoy it?
Right.
They're curious. So that would be what we call intrinsic motivation. Or are they doing it because they feel like they have to get a good grade? So that's more extrinsic motivation.
External forces.
Yeah, exactly. And do they see reading as a way to connect with others? That social element.
So it's not just like a yes or no, they read or they don't read. It's really about understanding the why behind it. Why might they engage with reading? Why might they not? And the paper highlights two specific models to help us understand how those social influences, especially from parents, might play a role here.
Yeah, for sure. So the first is called McKenna's model of reading attitude acquisition. And this model suggests that there are three main things that directly shape how someone feels about reading.
Okay.
And two of them are kind of internal to the individual. It's their past experiences with reading.
Right.
So have they had good experiences, bad experiences, and then also their beliefs about what will happen as a result of reading.
Okay, so what outcomes?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, will reading lead to something good or bad or just neutral?
Yeah.
But then the third factor is a social one. And that has to do with how much they believe that important people in their lives value reading. So these are called normative beliefs.
So unpack that for the listener. What this really means is that even if you as a parent really think that reading is important, that might only influence your teenager if they actually care about what you think.
Exactly. If they want to be like you or they see you as a role model.
Right. They want to kind of align with those values.
Yeah. If they're motivated to conform.
Mm-hmm.
So it suggests that just telling a teenager that reading is good for them might not be enough.
Right.
The connection between your support and their motivation isn't always direct.
It's not that straightforward.
No. It can depend a lot on the relationship. How much does your teenager care what you think right now?
Are they at that stage?
Exactly.
Okay. And then the model also looks at the home literacy environment.
Yeah. So that's just, having books around.
Which kind of that.
And that's seen as something that can indirectly encourage reading
Yeah.
and shape their attitudes over time.
Okay, so if books are just there, accessible, and they have positive experiences maybe with those books or just seeing you engage with them, it fosters that positive view over time. All right. Now, the second model that the paper discusses is called Guthrie and Wigfield's engagement model of reading.
Yeah.
So how does this model help us kind of understand parental influence a little bit better?
So Guthrie and Wigfield describe engaged readers as having a few key characteristics. So they're good at using reading strategies, they understand what they're reading, they're motivated to read, and really importantly, they interact socially around reading.
Okay.
So that could be talking about books with friends, family, or even participating in online communities.
Yeah, book clubs, bookstagram.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so social interaction isn't just something that might influence reading. According to this model, it's actually a defining characteristic of someone who is really engaged.
Right. It's not just a cause, it's actually a sign of an engaged reader.
Yeah.
So it emphasizes that social aspect as something really important and suggests that if you're trying to help a struggling reader, looking at opportunities for social interaction around books could be key.
Yeah. So give them ways to connect with others over books.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this model also aligns really well with self-determination theory. And what that suggests is that when teenagers see that people they care about, their parents, their teachers, their friends, value reading and support reading, they're much more likely to internalize that value themselves.
Right. It becomes part of their own value system.
Exactly.
So both models, while looking at it in slightly different ways, really point to the significance of those social connections, and particularly those with parents,
Yeah,
in shaping a teenager's reading life. Now the paper moves on to kind of look at what does the research actually show us in these areas?
right.
And starting with kind of a general look at social support for reading.
Yeah. So the paper reviews a lot of studies that used a tool called the Motivation for Reading Questionnaire,
Okay.
or the MRQ. And this is a survey that's given to students to ask about all these different aspects of their motivation for reading. So things like how much they enjoy reading, how confident they feel about their reading skills,
Mm,
and importantly for our discussion, how much they talk about books with other people.
with their social circles.
Exactly. And generally, these studies found that when older students reported having more of those social interactions around reading, they also tended to have higher levels of other positive reading motivations, like feeling competent
Okay.
and curious about what they were reading. So for you listening, this might suggest that encouraging those conversations, having those book talks with your teenagers' friends, could actually fuel that internal desire to read more.
Yeah, give them a reason to be interested, a reason to want to read more,
Yeah,
and also to feel more confident as readers.
exactly.
What's interesting, though, is that it seems that social interaction piece is linked more strongly to those internal drives, the feeling capable and being genuinely interested. It's almost like the social element sparks something deeper within them.
It does, yeah. Like it becomes contagious in a way.
Right.
But one thing that the paper points out is that the link between social interaction and things like how much students actually read or how well they performed academically, that was a little less clear.
Okay.
It wasn't as strong of a connection. And they also consistently found that girls tended to report more social interaction around reading than boys.
Okay, so there's a bit of a gender difference there.
Yeah. And that social motivation seemed to dip a bit during the middle school years.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that definitely tracks with what we know about the social dynamics.
Yeah, that whole middle school phase.
That shift that happens in middle school. All right, so then the paper really focuses in on quantitative studies that specifically looked at direct parent support
Right.
and their beliefs about their children's reading.
Yeah, so these are studies that actually measured parent behaviors. Like, do they provide books for their kids?
Uh-huh.
What are their own reading habits? How much do they generally encourage reading? And a lot of these studies found a positive correlation between those behaviors and things like teenagers' attitudes toward reading and how much they read, even when researchers tried to control for things like socioeconomic status.
So even taking those factors into account, there still seems to be a relationship there.
Yeah, definitely. And a really consistent finding is that it's not just about having books available, it's about that active engagement with reading.
Right, so it's not enough to just have a bookshelf full of books.
Yeah, it's really about the modeling.
You actually have to be seen reading yourself, talking
Yeah.
about books.
Yeah. And that tends to have a much stronger impact than just the passive availability of reading materials.
So really setting that example, being a reader yourself.
Exactly.
All right, so what about what parents actually believe about their teenagers' reading abilities?
Yeah, so the research looking at parental beliefs, particularly their beliefs about their child's reading competence, was a little bit more mixed. So the connection between how confident parents were in their teenagers' skills and how the teenagers themselves felt about their reading, that wasn't always strong or consistent.
So that's a little surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You would think that if a parent really believed in their kid's reading ability, that would translate.
That would be a huge motivator.
Yeah. But it might be that at this age, teenagers are more influenced by their own experiences in school,
Uh-huh.
the feedback they get from their teachers. So
Hmm.
parent beliefs maybe matter a little less than they did when kids were younger.
Yeah, and they're starting to kind of form their own opinions.
Exactly.
All right, and then the paper also looks at how the influence of parents compares to other important figures in a teenager's life.
Right.
So teachers and friends.
Yeah. And this was a really interesting part of the paper. Some research suggested that parents might contribute to reading motivation in a greater variety of ways than teachers do.
Hmm.
So, for instance, one study identified several different parent behaviors that were linked to reading motivation,
Okay.
but they only found a few links with teacher behavior.
Okay.
So it might be that parents have more avenues to influence their kids' reading,
Uh-huh.
but on the other hand, other studies found very similar connections between the beliefs of both parents and teachers
Okay.
and how confident teenagers felt about their own reading abilities.
Okay. So it's not necessarily that one is always stronger than the other.
Right.
It might depend on what specific aspect of reading we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
And there's this one really interesting study from Taiwan that found that both parent and teacher support were very strong predictors of how much adolescents read, even stronger than just having books available at home.
Okay. So those social connections
Those really matter.
really matter. All right, and then what about comparing parents to peers? So the research there seems to indicate that while friends can definitely influence what specific books a teenager reads,
Right.
and, they create those social reading activities.
Clubs,
Yeah, exactly.
like going to author events together.
That kind of thing. Parent support often remains a really strong predictor of their overall motivation to read.
Yeah. So it's like friends can kind of steer them toward certain genres or specific books.
Right.
But parents can really impact that overall enjoyment of reading and whether they see it as a valuable thing to do.
Okay. And the paper also points out that culture seems to play a role here,
Yeah, for sure.
with the link between parent-child reading habits being stronger in some cultures than others.
Yeah, it's not a universal phenomenon in exactly the same way everywhere.
Right. All right. Now, moving beyond those kind of number-based studies, quantitative studies, the paper also looks at qualitative and mixed method research, which often gives us that much deeper and more nuanced understanding of the dynamics at play.
Yeah, for sure.
So what were some of the key insights from those studies?
Well, these studies provided some really rich examples of how parents introduce their teenagers to specific authors or genres
Uh-huh.
and engage in these really informal literacy interactions that can keep kids interested in reading.
Okay. So it's not always about these big formal programs or strategies.
No, it's often the everyday stuff that really makes a difference.
Yeah.
So, for example, one study highlighted how parents played a key role in introducing their teenage children to Stephen King,
Okay.
which is a very specific example, but it just shows how those little things can really impact their reading choices later on.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely know people who kind of have that author that their parent introduced them to that they still read religiously today.
Exactly.
So it's really powerful.
Yeah. But on the other hand, some of these in-depth studies also suggested that the parents of teenagers who really didn't like reading, their parents' support behaviors might not actually differ that much from the parents of avid readers. So it suggests that the teenager's own willingness to engage with that support is really critical.
So you might be doing all the right things.
You might be offering encouragement and buying books and talking about reading,
Right.
but if your teenager is just not receptive at that point, it's not going to have the same impact.
They have to kind of meet you halfway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And other qualitative research really emphasized the influence of parents who are readers themselves
Okay.
and who share their own reading passions with their children.
Right. It's that authenticity piece, right?
Yeah, for sure. You can't fake it. You have to genuinely enjoy reading yourself.
Yeah. But the paper also stresses that cultural norms
Yeah.
and what parents prioritize. Like, for example, if they only value academic reading,
Right.
that can actually sometimes limit or even discourage teenagers from reading for fun.
Exactly. If they get the message that reading is only for school, they might be less likely to pick up a book in their free time.
Right. And it becomes a chore.
Yeah. And studies that looked at diverse groups of adolescents also found that while friends were definitely important for those social reading practices,
Mm-hmm.
parents and especially mothers, often had a more foundational influence on how teenagers felt about reading in general.
Okay.
Although, again, this could vary based on gender and cultural background.
Right. And it goes back to that point of how complex these dynamics are. It's never just one thing.
Yeah.
So even as peer influence grows during those teenage years,
Yeah?
the groundwork that parents laid in earlier years
Yeah,
and even their ongoing influence still matters
absolutely.
when it comes to a teenager's overall attitude toward reading.
Okay.
So as we start to wrap up this deep dive into this research, what are the main takeaways that you think are most important for parents listening? What do you want them to walk away with?
Well, for you listening, I think the key message here is that your role as a parent in shaping your teenager's reading life doesn't disappear as they get older. It evolves. The research suggests that it's really crucial to foster a positive attitude towards reading.
Okay.
And that can involve things like showing that you value reading yourself, talking about what you're reading,
Right.
creating those opportunities for relaxed and enjoyable interactions around books. It's about being a reading role model, not just a rule enforcer.
Right. Making it a positive part of family life, not a chore.
Exactly.
Yeah. And what are some interesting questions that this research brings up that maybe we can leave our listeners with? What do you think is worth thinking about after this?
Well, you might want to ask yourself, what kind of reading support do I think would be most motivating for my own teenager right now?
Okay.
Is it just having a wide variety of books available? Would it be me suggesting books that I've loved? Would it be creating opportunities for them to discuss books with friends?
Yeah.
And also think about how your own reading habits and preferences have been shaped by your friends compared to your parents.
Right.
This research really shows how complexly all these different social influences interact.
It really does. And it's a great reminder to kind of look back at our own experiences
Yeah,
and how they might relate to our teenagers.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, what about the bigger picture here? What does the paper say about future research in this area? What are some of the gaps that still need to be filled?
Well, the paper concludes that there's still a lot we don't know, and it highlights the need for more longitudinal studies. So studies that actually follow teenagers over a long period of time to see how those influences change.
Okay.
And it also suggests that we need more research into the specific types of parent support that are most effective for different teenagers in different contexts.
Yeah.
And something I found really interesting is the paper points out that we also need to learn more about any potential negative parental influences on reading. Are there things that parents do that actually turn kids off from reading? And it also suggests we need to look at the emotional aspects of those reading-related interactions within families.
Okay.
So how do those relationships, the dynamics, the emotions, how do those play into the reading experience?
Yeah. So while this research gives us these valuable insights, there's clearly still a lot more to explore. It's complex.
It is.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. I think it definitely offers a lot to consider.
Absolutely.
And for you listening, take some time to think about how your own reading journey has been shaped by the people around you. You might just find some surprising insights there.
I think you will.
All right. We'll see you next time.
See you then.